In this episode, we apply another 100 meters of RTV, put on the engine brackets, prep and install the front diff, and we run into a little bit of an issue with the Magnus VVT covers and the alignment tool. So stick around and let's see what happened. To recap, in the last episode, we had to take off the upper oil pan once again because there was an issue with the oil pump and one of the main studs where we needed to give the oil pump a little bit more of a clearance, so we had to grind that down a little bit. It wasn't affecting any of its structural integrity, so that was fine to do. Here you can see we've removed everything, including all the bolts for the upper oil pan. We also had to install the axle pipe for the front axle that sort of goes through and connects to the diff, or aka the diff tube. So that had to go on first, as you couldn't slide it in after the fact. So once it was all removed and then the diff tube was installed, with all the seals and everything like that, we could put the upper oil pan back onto the block. Next up was the oil pump, which now had the extra clearance to clear one of the main studs. So that was then bolted down and then we torqued it after the fact. With that done, the tensioner went on and then we torqued down the tensioner. The torque values were pretty low, so I'm sure if you hand tighten it, it would have been enough, but we just wanted to make sure and we did torque it. After this, we had the extension for the Mad Sweden billet oil pan go on with the suction tube for the oil pump, and then obviously the billet pan went on after that. So we then blocked off one of the ports. Not sure what we'll do with that just yet, but I'm sure we'll find a use for it. But for now, I'm just blocking it off. The other hole is for the oil drain bolt. Next up, we're installing the seals on that side of the diff tube area, and then we'll put the axle pipe through that so that we can get it all ready to mount the diff. So this is the axle pipe that I'm talking about. It simply slides through and bolts down, and the top part slides into the diff, obviously then giving drive to the front. There we go, all installed and torqued down, ready to go for the diff. Next was the very beautifully built Mad Sweden valve covers or rocker covers, and we simply put them on with the gaskets and then bolted them down, and then followed the torque procedure as per the OEM service manual. After that, the exhaust manifold studs went on, just so we can get it ready for when the turbos are mounted. And of course, we torqued them down as per the OEM service manual. If you haven't seen the previous videos of this build before, click the link on the top right corner to follow the previous episode so that you can check out what's happened so far. With that all now done, the long block is fully assembled apart from the front timing cover, which we're going to install right now. So we have a brand new OEM front timing cover, which has been hydro dipped with a carbon look to it. It does fade to black down the bottom. We were going for an OEM plus look, but the hydro dipping looks so much better. Before you install the timing covers, install these two rubber seals that go right there. Next up, we need to RTV the front timing cover. There is a pattern that you need to follow, so have a look at the OEM service manual. It's got the pattern. It's impossible to muck up if you simply look and see how it goes. So after the 100 meters of RTV went on, the front cover went on. Unfortunately, I couldn't record this part. It was a two-person job as we needed to guide it in properly. Next up was all the bolts that bolt down the timing cover. And we've got some T1 titanium fasteners which are all in black, so they went on and were torqued down. So next we have the VVT covers from Magnus, all in billet of course, and obviously hydro dipped with the carbon look to match the rest of the front cover. These are the VVT seals, and you do need to install them 3 per side on the covers. Almost forgot, there's 2 filters in this part. If you don't have a brand new cover, I would suggest buying new filters. They're not that expensive. Do swap them out. Since these are brand new OEM covers, we already had them pre-installed, so no need to swap anything. This theme for the engine is looking so damn good with the carbon and the billet anodized red. The finished product, when it's all done, is going to look absolutely amazing. It's a bit of a shame that some of it is covered and hidden in the engine bay, but it is what it is. And then we ran into a little bit of a problem. So this is the Magnus VVT alignment tool. And unfortunately, the tolerance seemed to be out because it didn't fit where it needed to fit so that we can get the alignment correct for the VVT. After a fair amount of back and forward with Magnus, they have sent out a new one, but for now we're getting these things installed and we will check the alignment before the engine goes into the car. So these are the oil lines that come with the Magnus VVT. We will be swapping them out to black lines and black fittings, but we're just using what they provided us just to get an idea of, the sizes and what we need to do in terms of routing before it is swapped out. I wish Magnus had an option to provide black lines and fittings, as most people go with a black front timing cover anyway, and that just makes sense to have that all in black just to blend in very nicely. Next up, we've got the VVT solenoid, which is one for each side, and that's just getting bolted on. And we can't forget the thermostat housing, which needs to go on next. It's pretty straightforward, one gasket behind and 3 bolts, and it's all done. With that all done, we're now going to move back onto the lines and fittings for the VVT, which we're about to swap out for black lines and fittings. So starting off with some black banjo bolts and fittings just to get the angles for the various lines correct, and then we'll get the lines a bit later, but you can see we're trial fitting the different angles of the fittings and things like that. Obviously, AN fittings come in various types of degree angles and things like that, so we need to see what's going to work well, as we're also needing to mount a catch can system in this area, so we need to be very careful with that. Next was the engine brackets. Really straightforward, you really can't stuff that up. And of course, torque it down. The VR38 has one bracket on each side, which then goes onto the motor mounts. There is also a section on this particular bracket that supports the diff. And you can see there, the black fittings already look so much nicer. Now we need to mount the diff. This is a Quaife LSD with a billet housing, billet front cover, billet side bearing, and of course all OEM new internals like seals and things like that. We realized we had to actually get the motor mount brackets off first, install the diff, and then put the brackets back on. It was a little bit fiddly, but it is what it is. There's a number of bolts that hold this thing in place, so follow the manual. There's one on the backside, 3 on the underside near the upper oil pan, and a couple on the top there. And there's also a seal that goes on the axle side, and there's another rubber piece that sort of goes just where that diff tube that I showed earlier goes as well. With that all now installed and torqued down as per the service manual, we can get the engine brackets back on. Now this side has a 2-piece bracket, and one piece needs to go on to the diff first, and then the top side bracket needs to go on. You can see it a bit better here in this clip, where the difference between the new and the old bracket is pretty apparent, and you can see what I mean by it being a 2-piece bracket system. With that now done, we can get those brackets all torqued down and move on to the next step, which will be turbos. We then rotated the engine on the engine stand, and we're going to start with the passenger side. You can see we've got the AMS Omega 11 turbo kit for this car. I'm in Australia, so this is our passenger side on this side, just in case anybody wants to comment otherwise. Don't forget the gaskets for the exhaust manifold. They go on first, and then we install the turbos. Now, the purpose of us getting the turbos on now is just to check the clearance for the block, as you do need to notch the block a little bit on the driver's side for me here in Australia, or the passenger side if you have a left-hand drive car. Okay, so with the turbos mounted, we routed the lines just to see how it would sort of work. With the driver's side, we will notch the block a little bit just to give it a bit more clearance for peace of mind. With everything mounted and doing a little bit of a test fitting, it does look really, really good. Can't wait to see what the Omega 11 turbo kit spools like and what sort of power it makes and everything like that. The kit comes with everything that you need. It uses minimal OEM parts. Before notching the block, make sure you cover everything up and make sure that there's no holes that are left open so that metal debris doesn't get in there. And pretty much grind away a little bit at a time. Be very careful just to give it a little bit more clearance if you are running this kit or anything with a big rear housing compared to stock, to be honest. With that all done, you can see how much material was removed in this clip here. You can see how much metal debris there is everywhere, so we really got to be careful. Anyway, that's it for this episode. In the next one, we'll get the turbo kit back on, route all the lines and plumb it all up. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.